The Invincible show is brutally intense, featuring hardcore violence and gore. But what are the most brutal moments in the entire series? Today, we'll answer that question by going through each and every brutal moment the show has. Starting out in Season 1, Episode 1. The show's first real intro to brutality, Omni-Man's betrayal of the Guardians of the Globe. This is the culmination of multiple brutal moments, so buckle up. The Guardians are summoned to their headquarters, but instead of a threat, they find Omni-Man. This moment is not brutal for the gore alone, but for the emotional betrayal. He was their ally, and now he's their executioner. Red Rush is the first to fall, caught mid-flurry. Omni-Man crushes his skull while he desperately tries to fight his way out at super speed. The moment is shown in an excruciating super slow-mo visual of his eye popping out of his socket. His head literally explodes, and the scene lingers just long enough to ramp up the horror of it all. Next is Darkwing, foolishly going for an attack against Omni-Man, who easily catches him and slams him to the floor like a limp noodle. The sickening cracks and shattering of his body might be brutal, but not as brutal as Omni-Man throwing his body at Green Ghost for a distraction, so that he can impale her head on his fist. He keeps the tone of using the dead bodies of their teammates and shields himself from Aquarius's water jet by using her flailing body. The next to go down is, of course, Aquarius, after Omni-Man catches War Woman's mace and smashes his skull into giblets in a single blow. The last three deaths come back to back to back in just a few short moments. He crushes Martian Man's organs, leaving him to fall to the floor like a wet blanket. He then impales the Immortal through the chest before catching War Woman and spinning her head 180 degrees around. A moment that is disgustingly highlighted by her slumping to the floor, vomiting blood, then keeling over. Omni-Man finishes the onslaught by returning to the Immortal and decapitating him. An absolute slaughterhouse montage to start with, but stick with us, as it only gets worse. After the brutal massacre of the Guardians, the second episode picks up with the world reeling and Mark trying to become a hero. But this episode proves, even when Omni-Man isn't on screen, people still die horribly. Starting with the first wave of the Flaxen invasion, they attack Earth through a portal. Civilians are vaporized, crushed, or riddled with alien weapons. It is a chaotic war zone. One woman gets cut in half by a beam of energy, another is crushed under debris, and blood and body parts are scattered across the screen. A cop gets vaporized by laser fire. Invincible, in the attempt to save an old lady, is shot down mid-flight and crashes, revealing her mangled body. It is truly horrifying. Just when it seems like they might win, they rapidly decay. Their tech fails, their skin rots, and they collapse in piles of bones and screams. That is, of course, not the end of the Flaxen threat. Omni-Man decides to take the fight to them, and, no longer constrained by his guise as a hero, commits genocide. Destroying their cities, killing their leaders, he literally punches the planet into submission to add insult to injury. Just as he leaves, he drops a city-sized chunk of the planet on the remnants of a decimated city, a Flaxen father and their youngling looking up in despair. Another shockingly brutal moment at the hands of Omni-Man, but it doesn't end there. Moving along to episode 5, he smashes into the building and throws a forklift to pin the leader to a cabinet. When it seems like he's not interested in outright killing, he proves us wrong. Snatching up a gun and throwing it through the head of one of the gunmen, smashing it open like a ripe watermelon. He crushes another between two shelves and kills a third by throwing another person into him so hard that his chest collapses. A weapon unto himself, he doesn't even need to react to kill. A gunman shoots at him, and the bullet ricochets off and into his own forehead, the hole almost allowing us to see clean through. Ending the entire fight by picking up the leader and snapping his neck with just the push of a thumb. This guy is a walking catastrophe, but that pales in comparison to what happens later in the same episode, when Titan and Invincible come face to face with a team of villains, including Battle Beast. The villains appear to make a mistake when they electrocute Invincible, since he absolutely freaks out and goes to town, punching one villain into the wall, then swinging him into another, before smashing through a lava-based villain, seemingly cutting him in half. This is almost instantly to put an end when Battle Beast smashes his head onto the floor, the shockwave filled with the blood splatter from Mark's face. Mark is unable to defend himself as the brutality continues. Battle Beast repeatedly beats him, again and again, ruthlessly. The Guardians try to intervene, but they are very quickly put in their place. Before Battle Beast returns to Mark and smashes him in the chest with that mighty mace, an explosion of blood and Mark's screams follow, and Battle Beast licks the blood off his maw. A truly terrifying combatant. But he's not done yet. Black Samson rushes him, and Battle Beast easily catches the blow and snaps his hand like a twig, bone and everything showing through the gore. He smashes Monster Girl's face with 2 rocks, ripping her face off, leaving most of her skull exposed. Absolutely monstrous. But the worst is yet to come. This one gets pretty dark. A young college student is abducted and transformed into a cyborg through brutal surgery. He awakens to the horror taking place around him, bodies hanging from the ceiling, half made already, before looking down at his hand, which is gone, replaced by a crude robotic claw. Sinclair, the madman behind it, cuts out the college student's vocal cords on screen, who gurgles grotesquely. It then cuts to the life-saving surgeries the Guardians need to undergo to survive the last episode's mess. They are in a bad spot, convulsing, vomiting blood. At one point, a doctor even pronounces that Monster Girl is drowning in her own blood. Before she shoots upwards and transforms into the monster, her skull is still clearly visible, as she vomits more blood before collapsing on the table.
She's drowning in her own blood.
While not a shocking moment at the hands of a current fight, it really does drive home the brutal aftermath of what some of the stronger villains are capable of, and what the team has to endure to survive. Later in the episode, we see sort of a sick reverse of this when William is captured by Sinclair, about to undergo the horrific surgery, while Invincible tries to rescue him. Fighting off multiple cyborgs at once, he rips the helmet off of one of them, revealing it to be William's love interest. As Sinclair cuts straight into the flesh on William's arm, something in his love interest comes back to the surface, and he helps to rescue William. In the final moment of the encounter, Invincible backhands him so hard that his jaw turns to mush. Though it's definitely cathartic, but still nothing compared to what's to come. In episode 7, a much sadder moment occurs as Rudy cradles his dying original body, a small deformed creature. It wheezes and coughs, dying as it tells its clone to enjoy life and change the world. Rudy tearfully offers to help his original body, who asks to die instead. We are forced to sit and watch as he draws his last breath, slowly and painfully. It is truly a tragic moment, one that is undeniably brutal. But now we are coming to the end of the season, where the brutality ramps up to 11. Omni-Man is looking for Mark, but in his search, he comes across Donald, Cecil's right-hand man. Donald goads Omni-Man into attacking, and he obliges happily by grabbing Donald's spine like a squishy toy. Donald goes out like an absolute madman though, and detonates the house after telling Cecil, "It's been an honor."
It's been an honor.
Pissed but alive, Omni-Man flies in search of Mark before Cecil unleashes an absolutely devastating orbital laser, one with as much punch as a small nuke, hitting Omni-Man directly. A true spectacular shot of the explosion lights up the entire scene. As Omni-Man continues his search for Mark, he is again confronted by Cecil, who has more than a few tricks up his sleeve. He drops a pot of reanimant onto Omni-Man. They are lightning fast and swarm him in seconds, smashing him into the floor and breaking through it. They bite at him, claw at him, and do anything they can to inflict as much damage and pain as possible. They are the bodies of dead soldiers, forced to fight an incredible threat. Omni-Man is only slowed down a little bit, ripping the first one in half by bracing its head against his knee and pulling at its legs till it is ripped in half, thankfully off screen. He punches the head off the second one and squishes the head of another on the floor like a bug, before on-screen ripping the last in half and shoving the floating camera inside its corpse. Just wow. But it doesn't stop there. It only gets worse, because the Immortal is back. He goes straight for Omni-Man, enraged and out for blood. The fight is brutal, but short. The world watches as Omni-Man punches the teeth out of the Immortal's skull. They smash each other through the air and into the ground. Before Omni-Man once again impales him on his fist, it comes out of his back on screen and in gruesome slow motion, blood exploding everywhere. But the Immortal fights back, trying to gouge out Omni-Man's eyes, jamming his thumbs deep as Nolan screams in pain. He finally cuts him in half with one fell blow, and the Immortal falls limply through the sky to the floor. Ending the episode as Nolan turns to his son. I think you know what's coming next. Hands down, the most brutal moment in the entire first season. It's basically most of the entire episode, so let's get into it. It starts with the Immortal hitting to floor right in front of us in 2 sickening, squelching thuds. Covered in gore, Omni-Man tries to reason with Mark, revealing the truth. The brutal truth. His entire home planet was made perfect by a cull of sorts where the strong killed the weak. The Viltrumites brutalized each other in pursuit of perfection, leaving mountains of bodies in the aftermath. Mark, not having any of this, goes on the offensive and their fight begins. He starts off gentle, only grabbing Mark by the throat and slamming him around. Then Cecil scrambles the jets, who are less than effective. Omni-Man goes after them like a shark in the water, smelling blood. He smashes the fuselage of one, allowing the pilot to eject, and Mark catches him. He even gets a chance to thank Mark before Omni-Man menacingly slams into the ground right behind him in a chilling moment. He scolds his son for wasting his effort before exploding the man's face right in front of him. The gore lands all over Mark's face as he catches the headless corpse.
So much effort. For what?
No!
Omni-Man returns his attention to the surviving pilot. Mark, enraged, goes on the attack. Omni-Man almost teases Mark about how his killing the pilot disturbed Mark before punching him directly in the face, which sends him flying into the city. The shockwave alone kills multiple people. In an attempt to save some people from a collapsing building, Mark is left among the rubble holding only a ripped off arm. Mark barely gets a second to look around at all the death and destruction before Omni-Man returns to ramp it up even more. Omni-Man continues the mental brutality, telling Mark every human life is worthless, calling his mother worthless, trying to crush Mark's spirit as well as his body before slamming him into the metro system, where we get the most shocking moment of the episode. He picks up Mark and faces him towards the oncoming train. He struggles helplessly as it smashes into them in brutal slow motion, Mark's flailing body as the bodies of people crash into them and are ripped apart in the hundreds. Body parts and screams and blood flying everywhere as the scream of metal being torn apart roars around them. They go through about 9 carriages of people, women, and children, ripped to pieces in an instant as Mark screams in horror. Omni-Man continues to drill the mental attack into Mark, calling the humans meaningless as he squishes another person's head like a bug, before finally turning the attack to Mark full force, slamming him into a mountain, and just laying into him blow after blow after blow. Blood spewing from Mark's broken body, he continues to mangle his own son. It is truly hard to watch. Mark holds out to the very end, a mashed pulp of blood and gore. While that may have been the hard-hitting end of season 1, it continues to ramp up in the later seasons, bringing it back now to season 2. The very first episode is coming out swinging, opening a dystopian alternate universe. Here, Mark has sided with Omni-Man, leading to a brutal regime. The city lies in ruins, and resistance is met with lethal force. The first victim we see is, of course, the Immortal. Mark is toying with him before Omni-Man enters and slices his arm off before snapping the other, and in an incredible combo, decapitates him. Invincible catches the head and crushes it viscerally. They continue their rampage by descending on a group of resistors. The key member here is Adam Eve herself, a more beat up, hardened version at least. Omni-Man goes after the alternate robot, still the deformed Rudy in the pod. He smashes it, and Robot tells him that one day, he too will die. And Omni-Man is in a moment of Shakespearean brutality, quips back with, "Sure, but you should have died at birth," showing us that not all brutal moments are just punching and gore, some are in the moments of brilliant dialogue. The moment comes to an end when Mark catches Eve by the throat and then snaps her neck. Brutal, right? Yeah, no. The real brutality comes at the fact that Mark snapped her neck in such a way that she still lives, just paralyzed, prisoner in her own body. The episode comes to an end with another brutal moment at the hands of Angstrom Levy, a name you will be hearing a lot more later on. As Mark struggles to fight multiple variants of the Maulers, they overwhelm him and begin kicking the hell out of him while he is on the floor. Mark once again removes his helmet and the machine he is powering explodes and disintegrates the Maulers. They die in a fiery explosion that erases even their bones. It's not over yet. The post-credits scene shows that a single Mauler, horribly burned and scarred, survive. He finds Levy, now a terrifying mutated monster, with an enormous oversized brain covering most of his back now, and he swears vengeance against Invincible. More on that later though. For now, it's on to episode 3. It's a moment far from the main cast. So far, it's halfway across the galaxy, in fact. It's Alan's first encounter with the Viltrumite scouts. While he is brave enough to stand up to them, he is definitely no match. They take turns slapping him around, doing more and more damage in the pursuit of their information. The moment only lasts seconds, but it feels like hours watching it unfold. Alan becomes more and more brutalized until it becomes apparent that the Viltrumites have grown bored with their game. One punches his eye out clean out of its socket, but it remains attached, floating around through space grotesquely. Another follows up by severing his arm from his body. Eventually, the one that punched his eye out impales him and his guts explode out of his body. It truly is just downright awful to watch, as his girlfriend at the time can attest. The Viltrumites leave, and we get that haunting shot of Alan floating in space, a tangle of guts and viscera. But this season is just getting warmed up. The Viltrumites arrive on Thraxa, hot on the heels of Nolan and Mark. A Viltrumite named Lucan finds Mark and is about to seriously hurt him when Nolan pushes back. The first fight here is short, but is pretty brutal due to the fact that Nolan slices open Lucan's gut, and he has to hold his intestines in with his hands. He then pins Lucan to the wall using a stalagmite before finding his new family and calling on Mark to help him with the remaining Viltrumites. They find the aftermath of the Viltrumites' carnage on Thraxa, and after Nolan struggles with his newfound humanity, the other Viltrumites make themselves known. The fight is brutal, cutting between Mark and Nolan respectively. Mark is very quickly overwhelmed by his opponent. She seems to have him dead to rights, flying off with her hair wrapped around his throat. If not for Nolan, who dive bombs her off of Mark, it might have ended there. She's quick to come back though, and started expertly cutting Mark up with her hair dagger. Mark, seemingly having had enough and focusing on the dead bodies of multiple Thraxan, begins to fight back properly. The fight culminates in an astonishing set of quick cuts between him and Nolan, fully showcasing the brutality of the fight. People are slammed, sliced, and splattered with blood left, right, and center, ending with Nolan crushing the male Viltrumite skull just like Red Rush's. Particularly gruesome as he tries to hold what's left of his skull together, but no time for that, as the female Viltrumite stabs Mark in the gut, leaving a particularly grievous wound there. Mark calls for his dad, who smashes her jaw open, leaving her to groan and choke on her own blood. Just awful. And it's not over yet. Lucan, seemingly alright, launches a sneak attack and snaps Nolan's back like a glow stick. Still holding his guts in with his one hand, the three of them collapse and lose consciousness. It really is a horrifically brutal fight. One that ends with Mark left there a crippled, broken mess, while Omni-Man is taken off to be executed, adding an emotional gut punch to the end of all the, well, actual gut punches. Backing away from the more visceral, brutal moments, let's focus on a more emotionally brutal moment. Donald, seemingly alive after the events of Season 1, begins to question Cecil and pulls at the string of how he could possibly still be alive. Cecil does everything he can to keep his friend from finding out, but finds out he does. And it's truly a jaw-dropping moment when Donald finds out that he is nothing more than a brain in a jar. A cyborg kept alive and his memory erased, lied to, and broken. Living up to the episode title, this must come as a shock. But don't worry, plenty more shocking moments to come. Later in the episode, as Mark and some of the stronger Guardians are busy in space fighting the Sequid threat, the remaining Guardians are left to deal with the Lizard League. An almost laughable premise that ends in shock and awe. The fight actually starts out as typical good versus bad, but quickly devolves into something far more sinister. Rex, Duplicate, and Shrinking Ray are all that's left to face off against the Lizard League, who have taken over a nuclear missile silo. Kate is always the first to be gored, ripped in half by the bigger Lizard Man, who proceeds to terrorize the other copies, smashing them into pieces, ripping them apart, until only one Kate remains. In a moment of sheer horror, she grips her by the throat as she tries to escape. To call for help, as she almost escapes, the big guy slams her into a copy of herself. They collapse into a pile of gore, dead. The shot really lingers on the horror of the scene, their bulging eyes, and the blood and tangle of their limb. And it only gets worse from here. Ray is pissed and crawls into the eye of a lizard man and expands enough inside of his head to kill him, pushing her way back out by fully removing his eye with a triumphant scream. But she gets eaten by the big lizard man. She tries to expand, and the scene is just Cronenberg levels of nasty. His neck bulges horrifically as we hear Ray scream in fury, screams that turn very fast to screams of fear. The big dude starts to cough up blood and tense down, trying to crush Ray within him. But we can hear the snapping and gurgling, and she seems to die too. It's so hardcore, but it keeps getting worse. Rex manages to explode one of the lizard men clean in half as he panics and tries to get away. He's muttering and mumbling the whole time as the big dude, once again being a nasty freak, bites his hand clean off. Rex falls to the floor screaming, but apparently had a trick up that sleeve. The sleeve that was now in the big guy's mouth as his head explodes. Charged energy from Rex is the culprit. It seems to be over as Rex laughs like a lunatic before he gets shot in the head. Blood splurts from the hole and he collapses, seemingly dead. It seriously is a gruesome scene. Again, lingering on Rex for just a little too long. Thankfully, Rex isn't dead. He gets up coughing and spurting blood. Deaf to the threats of the lizardman, he punches into him with his broken stump, mashing the lizardman's face into a pulp, being the nasty cherry on the a-hole cake of gruesomeness. Thankfully, the punches died down a bit, but they definitely did not end there. Coming up to the final episode of the season, one filled to the brim with some truly brutal moments, let's dive in. Starting strong almost immediately with the return of Angstrom Levy, using Mark's greatest weakness against him, his family. He has Debbie by the neck as she is holding baby Oliver. It's a tense moment. Angstrom throws throws him into multiple dimensions. Each time he comes back, Angstrom dives deeper into his menacing monologue, threatening the death of Oliver, who is, again, a baby. Giving reason to some of Angstrom's madness, we see a flashback of an alternate version who was terrorized by an evil variant of Mark, something that will also definitely come up again later. Debbie takes her chance to attack, but sorely regrets it as Angstrom slams her into the table by her throat, leaving Oliver to scream in terror as he snaps her arm in half like a toothpick. The whole time, she tries to comfort Oliver, adding to the hellishness of the scene. It of course all comes to an end when Mark tricks him into a portal and smashes him into the floor and pulverizes his face. The whole scene lingers on Mark just brutalizing Levy. Blood soaks everywhere around them. It is another one that is extremely cathartic, but just hard to watch. That might be the end of Season 2's brutal moments, but it is definitely not the end of the most brutal moments in the show. We still have Season 3 to cover, so let's get busy. Jumping straight into Season 3, we get a look at a younger Cecil attempting to stop two villains from enacting their pilot. Believe it or not, it actually starts off pretty tame. Good guy trying to stop the bad guys, that is, until it's revealed just what their plot really is. The two villains activate some sort of gas bomb and stand directly in front of it as it begins to melt their very flesh from their muscles, one of them slipping in the blood as they both cry in madness. Their skin is completely gone as they both reveal in their lunacy. Cecil, being the absolute champion he is, pushes them inside the bomb's cabinet and holds it shut. His skin also begins to melt horrifically, his eyes bulge and run bloodshot. It's really hardcore. Another super hard watch. But hey, he saved the day, right? But that is all a setup for his stance against Invincible. They are both in the White Room, decades later of course, when Cecil sicks the reanimant on him. Mark is pissed and begins tearing the reanimant into pieces. He impales them, punches holes in them, and rips their arms off. No longer holding back, he even punches one so hard it explodes into guts and viscera. Then we get the Viltrumite nullification frequency for the first time. Mark screams in pain, and Cecil appears to have the upper hand. A moment of brutality punctuated by the tortured screams of Mark. But this is only beginning of the brutal moments in Season 3. Coming now to a more emotional brutal moment, we get a hauntingly silent short of two villains robbing a bank. The scene isn't very long, but it shows the two villains' struggles, just trying to survive. They even try to quit crime, become legitimate members of society, and try to find work. It quickly becomes apparent that they aren't cut out for normal life. Desperation punches them back into crime, all of this made worse as the once healthy flower in their apartment as it slowly dies. And this story comes to a shockingly abrupt end when Mark and Oliver take them out, just another day for them, but the end of the villain's desperate attempt to survive. Speaking of Oliver, the next brutal moment comes at his hands also. During an escapade from the Mauler twins to a launched nuke, Mark is forced to chase the nuke, leaving Oliver alone with the twin. Not yet understanding the need to hold back, he punches the jaw off one of the twins, but he doesn't stop there. He punches clean through the second twin, killing him instantly, and as the other one begs for mercy, he uppercuts his head off. Oliver walks the line between being a hero or being like his father, and the Maulers are very dead. The punches keep rolling. Our next brutal moment is Mark facing down King Immortal. The entire resume in itself is pretty brutal. Humanity under the heel of a despotic tyrant. The world in shambles. But the real brutality comes in the Immortal's pleas to be killed. His desperation to finally be put down like a sick dog. He forces Mark to oblige. Mark rips his head off clean, screaming as he does so. The whole thing leaves a sick taste in Mark's mouth. And ours, to be honest. On to a slightly more lighthearted moment of brutality, but it's still pretty gory if I'm being honest. Later in the same episode, Alan finally springs Nolan from space jail. The whole scene is pretty gruesome, with Alan clumsily killing the fragile guards, him freeing the battle beast. But the whole thing culminates in an awesome fight with the two Viltrumite guards in the middle of executing Nolan. The killer combo at the end is the best part. Alan flings the Viltrumite into open space, and he and Nolan collide through his face in the sickest bro fist I've ever seen. The blood flying around with pieces of the Viltrumite's face in there too. Poor Battle Beast floats laughably off while ripping into what's left of the other Viltrumite. But things are about to get really heated up in the last half of the season. Jumping into the next episode, Multipol's near escape from the prison is just sick. In order to escape, he makes so many clones of himself to blow the door off its hinges. Packed in the tiny cell, they begin to crush each other, exploding, and bones cracking, horrific gurgling noises, and just rivers of blood. It's pretty gnarly. Yet still nothing compared to what's to come. We come now to see the tragic story of Powerplex, a desperate man out for vengeance for his family who died during the Omni-Man's rampage. The consequences of Season 1 are apparent even now. When he finally gets Invincible to step forward, he's faking to kidnap his baby son and wife. The whole situation is already incredibly morbid. That is, until in a fit of rage and power, he unleashes an energy wave that kills both of them. The shot lingers on his wife and child for way too long. They're horribly charred corpses right in our face as Powerplex sobs among the ashes of his dead family. I don't even have words for this one. 1, probably the most emotionally brutal moment of the entire show. So far, that is. Moving away from emotional tragedy, let's get to the real meat of the final 2 episodes. It could be said that the final 2 episodes, even of themselves, are brutal in their entirety, but we will dive just a little deeper than that. The introduction of the evil Invincible variants has a ton of brutal moments, so let's just single out a couple of the higher stakes ones. In Adam Eve and Mark's fight against Omni-Man and Hooded Mark, she has her leg snapped like a twig and the blood explodes around it, making our Mark desperate and scared. The very next scene is no goggles Mark toying with the surviving members of the Guardians of the Globe, as the most of them lie dead or dying around him. Multiple copies of duplicates are scattered gorily around, but probably one of the best brutal moments come at none other than the hands of Rex Splode. As an evil variant of Invincible attacks their base, Rex buys the others time to escape and faces the variant alone and is mortally wounded. It seems like he's got no chance, but in the ultimate badass move, as the variant grabs him and monologues about how he's got nothing left, what could he possibly charge to use against him? Rex's quip will stick with us forever, because it's his entire goddamn skeleton before exploding and taking the both of them out for good. A tragic end to the comedian of the series. But now, the moment has arrived. Episode 8. What could even be said about the brutal moments from this episode? The entire first 27 minutes of the episode are one colossal battle between Conquest and the few heroes on Earth who could even hope to stand against him. They level cities, kill thousands, so much happens I could literally talk forever about it. So instead, I've cherry-picked the very best of the best just for you. The first one is Oliver rushing into the fight. He is set up so smoothly. The animation is just mwah, chef's kiss. He punches Conquest off of Mark before artistically gliding into a flashy slide, rushing Conquest and declaring big ass beatdown coming up before Conquest brings a smackdown so brutal it's actually hilarious. Oliver bounces off the shattering pavement like a limp golf ball. It's sick. Moving on, but sticking with Oliver, a moment that is definitely not funny. When Conquest hoists him above his head, holding him by his legs and head, and begins to pull, giving a monstrous monologue about how good it feels to rip someone in half. Oliver screams, the squelching, the sound of tearing and stretching, it's just so brutal. Thank God it did not last too long. Of course, we come now to Adam Eve's bout with him. She doesn't even do too bad for a little while before, of course, Conquest punches her face half off, then impales her straight through the torso, her blood exploding across the screen. The sound of her gagging on her own blood echo in our ears as she falls to the earth, her guts flapping around like wet noodles. It's just horrible. But the final, and in my opinion, the best brutal moment of the season comes as Mark takes his ultimate revenge. Mark, one-handed, starts to brutalize Conquest. Conquest snaps his other hand, so he uses his face. He headbutts Conquest again and again and again. Over and over, his face becoming more and more smashed, blood splatters everywhere as desperate, enraged screams fill the air. It's over a full minute of non-stop carnage, ending with the brutal shot of Conquest's mess of a face, not much more than a mash of gore and blood. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If I missed any brutal moments, then let me know down in the comments below. And if you need a break after all that action, how about checking out my other video about the funniest moments in Invincible?